Greetings and welcome to our Black Gay Diaspora podcast. I'm your host, Eric, and today I am joined by Palmira Koukkari Mbenga. I'm going to ask her to say that properly. Palmira is a Swedish journalist, actress, and script editor for Nexiko, which is, quote, Scandinavia's biggest and most award-winning independent production company, end quote. Previously, Palmira was with Sveriges Radio as a correspondent tasked with portraying young people's issues around the world. I really enjoyed our initial conversation. I think it was a week or so ago. And so I very much look forward to today's conversation and learning more about Palmira and her professional journey in Sweden. So, hey, Palmira, and welcome. How are you?
Hi, thank you. I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm, back in Los Angeles, back in the United States. I've been in LA. Today is 1 week that I've been back after being gone from the U.S. in general for almost a year and a half. Part of my time being able to return to Sweden a couple times and also the UK and then South Africa. So anyway, enough about me. How are you?
I have a lot of emotions today, which is a bit unusual for me. But I think it's, we're settling into fall. I really enjoy fall, the season, it's Libra season, so it's my season. And I also enjoy spooky season. So, but I feel also fall is very brief in Sweden. So it's hard for it not to get tainted with, then we have 4 months of winter and ongoing darkness, which is not really my season. But I am enjoying it. We have it's pretty foggy today, but we do have a pretty warm fall, which is nice. But then, there's also a lot of things happening in society and politically, and that's also weighing on my mind. So yeah, I'm well, but it's a lot of different emotions today.
Okay. And are you based in Stockholm?
I am, yes.
Now, is that your home city? Is that where you were born and raised?
It was. I was born and raised on the south side, in the south side of Stockholm. I've traveled a lot, but I've lived here my whole life.
We are recording on a Thursday, which is somewhat towards the end of the week. And you already shared there's a lot of things going on, I think, in Sweden right now.
There's a lot of shootings happening, which is, very troubling and very sad. A lot of young people dying. In terms of that, it's been a heavy week because it's been happening a lot lately. Thinking about that and also how this is affecting our coming generations. For my generation, we didn't grow up with this. So I do feel like there's a generation where a lot of young people are traumatized, which is terrible.
Same thing. My generation did not experience what it seems to be, at least in this country, so common these days, which is just horrifying. It's good that, you're bringing it to the forefront as far as talking about it more publicly, because, we do need to think about the safety of us in general, but of course the safety of the future generations. Yeah.
There's a lot of people doing good job, a very good job in both reaching out to these kids and talking about it and trying to organize things around this. So I'm very grateful for that as well.
If it's okay to ask, how do you identify under our LGBTQ plus umbrella?
I identify as lesbian and also as queer.
The queer, I'm starting to use that more, and it's something, I don't know if it's more European than American. Maybe ask what that means for you, using the term queer.
Yeah, I think for me, it means that I consciously try to diverge or step out of the cis hetero norm in more ways than just by who I fall in love with. It's also, being questioning of the institution of marriage or it means other stuff. And for me, being a lesbian, it means that I primarily love and fall in love with women and date women. But being queer for me, I think it's a broader term that kind of also allows me to state somewhat how I identify politically.
Well, we keep getting more letters, and I hope I'm not saying that in a derogatory way, but queer seems like, okay, queer. Yeah. So, yeah. I love your head wrap and then your necklace. Can you share with us about that?
Oh, yeah, thank you. I do have a necklace that is the continent of Africa, and I really like it and I like wearing it. And I do sometimes wear it consciously if I'm, for example, doing some type of, public talk or a meeting at work or something to remind people of like, that's my origin. I'm also visibly Black, even though I'm a light-skinned Black person. I'm biracial, mixed with white. But I mean, sometimes I do think people tend to forget that anyway, when you're in kind of like maybe at work and then after a while, they kind of get used to you. And it kind of feels like, yeah, but I'm not like you. Don't forget.
So I mentioned in the intro that you're a script editor for Nexiko. Can you share with us that position, your role?
Yeah. So if you're a script editor and you're in a project, which I have been for the past few months, I've been a script editor on the third season of a TV show called Young Royals. And so then my role has been to kind of have an overview of the script sometimes. Maybe the head writer, her name is Lisa Ambjörn, maybe she was like, oh, so can you keep track of like this character's arch? Is it consistent? Or, maybe sometimes it's the little things of, okay, so in that episode, we said that this is happening on a Thursday, and then, no, now we're saying it's a Wednesday. So like, which is it? Or, fact check stuff like that. And also, like, I've been part of the writer's room, kind of brainstorming ideas for the season. And then I've also done a lot of research with my journalist background that comes in handy. So it could be like maybe just researching. So they're in school, what kind of lessons would they have? What books would they be reading? Or I researched like a lot of things about the Swedish monarchy and like how things work there. So yeah, it's been great fun.
Sounds like a great position, and I'm going to fan out a little. I've seen both seasons, but literally coming back from South Africa to the US, I started to rewatch it again because it helps me with my Swedish. And
really,
to hear that you're on that show, I was just like, what?
Yeah, well, I was a fan as well. I was not involved in the first and the second season. So for me, it was just a great like joy and privilege to be able to join for the third season, because I did initially just enjoy watching the show and I really liked it for many reasons. So yeah, it's been really great. Yeah, a lot of people have been telling me like, oh my God, I'm going to be so much popular with my kids now that I can say that like my friend or my colleague or, are like working with Young Royals. Like I was like, okay, yeah, sure. It's a great show. And being a script editor, I feel it's my first job in like scripted television. And everyone has been really nice. And it's also, you're doing a lot of like making sure everybody get the right script on the right time. So maybe you talk to the art department and they would be like, okay, so for this episode, we need to know this and this and this and this. And then maybe like the costume department will be like, okay, so we need to know what are they going to be wearing for that episode? Do you know that? And then, I go back and forth. So it's been great fun to also kind of just see how like that works, how shooting a TV show work, and how like the process of writing all the scripts work, because they have like several writers for different episodes. So just seeing like that whole process has been great.
I've heard that title and had a vague idea, but it is so much more involved than I realized.
Yeah, I mean, I've only done this once, so maybe like if you're in a different project, it will look different. I have no idea. Yeah, it's been a great learning experience.
To kind of backtrack, because we, mentioning your necklace and the continent, but how are you connected culturally to Africa? What country?
My dad is Gambian.
Have you had opportunities to visit the country?
Yeah, I have, both privately and while working. I was there as a journalist as well.
There's 52 countries on the continent, and just find out how diverse and beautiful it is.
Yeah, definitely. That was one of my greatest experiences as well. When I was traveling as a journalist, I went to a few African countries, and then I was also the Africa correspondent for the Swedish Radio for a summer when the original correspondent was on vacation. And I think it really is so great to be able to travel to different countries and discover different cultures. I do feel like, especially in the West, a lot of people just see Africa as this big, monolith, when it's actually the opposite. It's so diverse. Even within like the same country, there will be a lot of different cultures and languages and stuff like that. So
we've kind of touched on that a little bit, but what is your educational background?
I have a bachelor's degree in media and communications. So that was me studying to become a journalist. And I kind of went into the journalism field after that. Started with an internship at the Swedish Radio, and then I just stayed there for 8 years. And then I've also taken like a lot of small courses here and there, studying language and stuff like that. And I do also have like a parallel interest in drama, especially theater. So I've kind of studied that on the side while studying journalism and working. On the one hand, it sounds kind of, okay, you're doing a lot of different things, but it is for me also just storytelling. So I do feel like there are similarities, and especially I was in journalism, but I mainly did radio and audio, like podcasts. So then you also work with your voice. For me, it's not super different, even though, when journalism, you're working with facts, and theater, you're often working with fiction. But for me, it's just, a tool to try to tell stories and say something about us as humans and as a society and as a world.
And you were with Swedish Radio, you said, for 8 years.
So I mainly worked for a channel called P3, which at least at the time was directed towards like a younger audience. And their news program was where I worked most of my years. And I started as a reporter. And I've also been a producer and a host, or like, when you read the news broadcasts. And so I did that for a couple of years. And then I was a correspondent for 3 years. And I was covering global youth. So I was working towards the same channel still a lot. I came back and I stayed at the same news program, but as a producer mainly, and did like a few documentaries as well. And then I was a social media reporter for a short while before I switched to a different job in a different company.
For my reference point, that sounds like a lot, but it's amazing.
Yeah, it is a very big company. I mean, it is the equivalent of like the BBC or the NPR. So the reason I was there for a long time was there was a lot of different things that you could do within the same company. I did also mainly work with news the whole time.
Prior to you joining the organization, were there people of color either behind the scenes or on camera in Sweden?
Oh, yes. I mean, the media industry is very white, but there's definitely been other people of color. Some of them are like the generation of journalists before my own. So like where I worked, talk about diversity and how to kind of increase diversity, or whatever diversity even means, trying to have those conversations on how to diversify both the staff, but also the reporting and how we report on certain issues and who we choose to speak to, what angles we choose, and what stories we're telling and what stories we're missing, and things like that. I was always very aware of, we are having these conversations, standing on the shoulders of the people who are having these conversations before us. It's been talked to for the past decades. And it must have been even harder back then because these issues are kind of, at least now, the problems are known and the issues are known, even though we still kind of struggle on sometimes what to do to change them. When I was working at the Swedish Radio, I was definitely also not the only person of color. There were quite a few of us, but it is also a big company, so we were kind of spread around. You could still be the only one at your department, or the only one in your newsroom and stuff like that. And especially as a Black person and Black woman, we were very few. One of the main issues that I had, and that I still have, I think, with the whole industry, is also that the higher up in the hierarchy you look, when you start looking at management positions and even producers or bosses, almost instantly it becomes almost totally white. So it's also the issue of people of color having difficulty, I think, advancing. When you look at the way things were, at least when I was there, I'm not going to claim to know what it is now. There's no denying that it is a structure. Because, for example, when I was a producer, I was the only producer of color at the channel I was working for. And it looked almost the same wherever you looked. And I think that also makes it harder for the journalists of color working there to make an impact. And it also, I do think, makes their working environment more difficult.
Have there been conversations around ways that can be diversified as far as, having more people of color as you move up the chain?
There was conversations happening, but I did find it hard sometimes because I do think a lot of people think that like the topic is sensitive. It could also be like, yeah, but we have this like leadership program within the company or something, like to try to find the future bosses of the company, for example. And then you would look there and you'd be like, okay, but what happens to these people afterwards? I'm sure these are great people, but it was also like almost an entirely white group. So sometimes it would be like, yeah, this is a diverse group because this people comes from a small town and that person has, maybe a Finnish background, which is really valid. Like it is valid to have people from different backgrounds. And, I'm Finnish myself. I do know that Finns have been very discriminated in this country, but that doesn't change the fact that it's still a white person that can pass as a Swedish person, perhaps. There are layers, but I did find it sometimes difficult to talk about the layers because diversity became a word and then you just threw everybody in the mix. It's not very dynamic and it's not a very deep way to talk about it, I think.
It brings up conversations I've had, the desire to talk about it, but it is also consciously and unconsciously this need to make sure that I'm okay emotionally and psychologically if I'm going to have these conversations, because that's just as important. And I like, especially these last few years, we are talking about the fact that these more sensitive topics, for those of us who are affected by them, it is also an emotional and psychological thing we're dealing with too.
Yes, definitely. I definitely felt that in 2020, where I was like, this is really important. We do really need to report about this and talk about this, and also, talk about how these issues look like within ourselves, like within our own company. But I definitely also sensed that it is different when it's not just some theory or some structure that doesn't affect you that you're talking about. You're literally talking about your own life, and if not your own life, then the lives of maybe your family or your friends or generally people who look like you. And that is different, I do feel.
Yeah, very much so. Even talking about it myself, it's just like
yeah. I mean, I can imagine, and I mean, you having this podcast.
Yeah, but it is beautiful. I could connect with individuals like you who are leading the way because of, what you're doing, how you've entered the space in a professional way, but how you're finding ways to encourage conversation.
I'm very thankful and honored just to be able to have this conversation with you as well. You're doing great work.
Oh, thank you.
Yay,
thank you.
love bombing.
I know. I listened to your Swedish radio interview with the Kenyan activist, where it was brought up about the realities and challenges of being part of the LGBT community in Kenya. And I wanted to ask you, as a woman of color, is there an advantage for you being able to speak and also being a part of the community, being able to speak to these individuals?
Yes, definitely. I would say being Black and being queer has opened a lot of doors for me professionally when it comes to interviewing and connecting with people. but that does not mean that I'm like them. I'm still light skinned. I'm still European. Like, I have a Swedish passport. I'm still very privileged. Like, when you're interviewing people, you have to build trust, sometimes very quickly. You reach out to someone and then you book an interview, and then that person is going to talk about very sensitive things with you. They're going to, talk to you about their lives. And I do feel like that bridge is sometimes shorter to cross when you can sort of connect on the fact that I do understand your situation, at least on another level, because I'm also queer and I grew up in Sweden, but I do have a background in another African country where being queer is also a struggle, and, stuff like that. I mean, for me as a journalist, who you are always affects your work. When you step into a room and you're going to talk to someone, you're not, translucent. Like, you're not a blank canvas, or, you're not a ghost, or, like, you're not neutral. Your reporting is supposed to be neutral, but no matter how you look at it, you bring something. And for me, I'm trying to use what I bring as an advantage, but I do feel like sometimes white journalists may not be as aware of it. Many of them are, but many of them are also like, no, I'm this neutral person. And it's like, as a white person in an African country, you're definitely not, In Kenya, they would ask me like, okay, so where you're from? Okay, Gambia, yes. And they, these activists like knew about the situation over there, and especially Gambia and Kenya, both being former British colonies, because the law in Kenya that forbids homosexuality and makes it illegal is an old colonial law. And even just, being part of the LGBTQ community as well, it's kind of like, no matter where you go, there's this sense of, your family. So that definitely helped. Okay, we're kind of at least on the same grounds here,
I like the way you put it, building the bridge. Yeah, and the importance of that when you're speaking with someone.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes when I've spoken of these issues, the pushback is, but a good journalist is supposed to be able to report on anything. You don't have to be queer to report on queer issues, and you don't have to be, of course, that's true. But building that trust, I think, is sometimes easier if you have an understanding, if that person is like, okay, but this person genuinely understands me because they are in a similar situation, or they, are, aware of these things that I'm going through. You usually say the same thing when it comes to maybe issues like domestic violence and rape. And, maybe you're like, yeah, a female reporter might be able to connect. And usually there's no questioning that when you talk about that in a journalistic setting. It's like, yeah, it'll probably be more comfortable for everyone. And the same goes for other issues as well, I think.
One of the first pieces that I discovered of yours is where you opened up about your experiences as being lesbian, navigating your authenticity in a professional capacity, and sharing about an experience with a colleague. How was it for you sharing about that on a public platform?
I think I was a little bit overwhelmed by just the love I received sharing that, and also by how many people said that they had gone through something similar. Because the story was about basically a colleague I was working with. It was a short period of time, and it was like, I haven't named that person or anything. They were trying to hit on me, and I was trying to like politely, be like, no, this is not what we're doing. I'm not interested. And then, the person was persistent. So in the end, I was like, no, I like women. And I really tried not to bring that up because that could be a safety issue, The point I was trying to make as well was that as a radio journalist, you often travel alone because you don't need like camera or anything. It's just you. And so I often got asked like, but how does that work? Do you ever feel unsafe? And I very rarely do. But the most unsafe or uncomfortable I felt usually is in the company of men that I've worked with, or men that I've had some other type of professional relationship, maybe a teacher, or, because that's kind of the relationship that has been more awkward than, just a random person in the street somewhere in a different city. Because then usually people are very helpful, they're kind of like, oh, are you alone? Can I help you? So for me, I think it was that was something that I needed to say.
For me, as a gay man, we talk about the umbrella of LGBTQ plus, but it reminded me that I'm attracted to the same gender, but I'm not experiencing the world in the same way. And so, to the best of my ability, I still need to make sure that I am educating myself as much as possible.
And for me, it also made me very aware of, because what that person said when I said that I was a lesbian was, oh yeah, but I find that really attractive. This sort of idea of you just haven't met the right guy yet, and da 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 da, and that is like super dangerous. And it also made me really aware of the fact that all over the world, but especially in certain places, like that type of quote unquote corrective rape is a really big problem. I am gay, but I'm also very straight passing. So for me, it was also a reminder of like, yeah, I also walk through this world very privileged, because most people cannot, like, they don't think that I'm queer unless I say so. Yeah, and for some people, this is like a daily constant fear.
Yeah, but again, the importance of, you sharing that part of your life journey, I think is just really great. And like you said, it opened up the dialogue for other people to share their experiences. How do you decide in a professional capacity what to share, or when it's maybe needed to share some of who you are on a personal basis?
Oh, that's a very good question. I don't really know. I haven't thought about what that process looks like, because I am a very private person. You might not think that for me sitting here right now, but I am. So I really choose when to share. Like in interview situations where I'm talking to someone or interviewing someone about like maybe intimate parts of their life and stuff like that, then I usually share if I think it'll make them feel more comfortable. Like without making it about me, I can just, say something or ask a question in a way that make them realize that I could, maybe I'm like, in my experience, how is it for you? So they kind of understand. I think it informs the reporting, I guess is what I'm trying to say. For example, a lot of people maybe knew that I was queer before I shared that story that we just talked about. I'd hosted talk shows during Stockholm Pride and stuff like that. But I don't think I had ever said publicly in that way. Maybe I had, but I think for some people it was still pretty obscure, maybe. So I do think I share things when I do feel like it'll make a difference. But I do still make a point of trying to keep my private life private. That's just my personality. I don't think it's anything wrong with being very open. I do admire people who are very open about themselves. It's just not how I usually am. For example, I shared that experience because I thought like, okay, but now I do have the chance to say something important, I think, and I cannot do it without putting myself in the story. But as a journalist, my instinct is to keep myself out of the story and let other people speak. So, yeah.
You've shared about, that you've traveled for work. Do you prefer, at least as far as being a journalist, do you prefer when it includes travel, or you prefer to be in the studio?
It's so hard to say. I do think I enjoy mixing them both up. I definitely like being out in the field, talking to people, being in the middle of the thing that's happening, whether it's an event like an election or something, or whether it's just, in everyday life, either here in Stockholm or a different city. I definitely do enjoy that a lot. I mean, yeah, being in the studio, like hosting, I do enjoy. But what I do think I enjoy even a little bit more is probably producing. You have more control over the content, at least as a news producer for news broadcasts. You do have a say in what we broadcast and who we talk to and what angles you kind of lead the work and delegate the work. So you kind of get to be like, you decide what to do and who to talk to, and then you get to just, I guess, have a little bit more influence. And I do also enjoy being kind of like a team leader. But every time I've been a producer, after a while, I kind of get that itch to get out in the field again. I do also know that it is important that like people who maybe have a different view on things and different knowledge and, a network outside of the majority society or the mainstream society, it is also important that these people do get to be editors and producers. If we're going to see a change in like the media industry, then these people have to also start getting into like team leading and management positions. So a producer and an editor within journalism is not the same as within TV. So being a script editor, at least for me, I have kind of been like the right hand to like the head writer. So that means that like I kind of did what that person needed me to do and kind of kept an overview, and it was a great thing because she was really open to my ideas. But in journalism, being a producer or editor means that you actually do have like power to make decisions.
Okay.
When I talk about journalism and me liking being a producer there, or, in radio, it's producer. If you work at a newspaper, it's called editor. It's essentially the same thing, which is that you have the final say on what gets broadcast or what gets printed. So for me, having people of color or queer people or whatever it is, people from minority backgrounds in those positions is important because you have more influence. Like if you're a reporter, you can pitch an idea, but the producer can always say no. Or you can have a story and they could be like, but that doesn't make sense. Why don't you take that out? Or why don't you talk to this person instead? As a reporter, you can find yourself constantly having to explain yourself. That's why I do also both enjoy it and think it's important.
Thank you for that. Thank you for clarifying.
It's very confusing, like these titles just going around meaning different things.
Yeah, and just you clarifying it, it definitely helped me. I hear and I feel your passion for writing, for journalism, for telling stories, but when did you discover your gift for writing?
Yeah, it's interesting getting that question because I don't think I've ever looked at it as a gift. I've looked at it as something I enjoy doing and something that I kind of knew that I was good at. I think it was always in the back of my mind that I was maybe going to be a journalist from maybe sometime in my teens. And that was not only because of writing, it was also because I always liked to like follow along in society and what was going on and follow along in the news and things like that. I do really enjoy storytelling, I guess, and also trying to understand things and how things work and why. And I just never thought about it until you asked me. But I did like write stories when I was a kid, and for a while I wanted to become a writer, like, to write novels. I was kind of like, but how do you do that? I think I also turned to journalism because I could see like, okay, so you go to university for it and then you apply for a job. Whereas writing novels, I was kind of like, but how, I do think playwriting is a bit more my thing, comes easier to me.
That's a good segue because in this past June of 2023, I saw that you took part in the premiere of the Cherry Tortured by the American playwright Aaron Posner, which is his adaptation of Chekhov's The Cherry Orchard. It was like a stage reading, if I understood correctly.
Yes, it was.
What was that experience like for you?
It was great. I really enjoyed it. I mean, I do really enjoy acting. So whenever I get a chance to do it, it just gives me so much joy. I've tried to think like, what is it that just makes me really feel alive doing it and really love it? I think it's because it is a chance for me to get out of my head. I spend a lot of time in my head, either at work, when you're doing journalism or you're writing, or you're kind of just in your head and trying to get what's in your head out. But when you're acting, all you got to do is be present. And you do really need to be present for it to work. If you're in your head, then it doesn't work. You get to work with your body and your emotions and, really feel things. And I just think that's great. So it was a great experience. And it was also great because this adaptation, long story short, like the original is about a family in Russia at the turn of the century, and they're about to lose their estate. The role I was playing is one of the sisters, and she's adopted. And in this new adaptation, she's also Black. Because the story was moved from the early 1900s to today or present day. So it was also kind of like, okay, so what does this mean like for this character and for this family?
Do you prefer stage or being on camera as far as acting?
I do have a weakness for the stage. What I love about it is that it's so direct. It happens here and now. There are no retakes, there are no redos. And also, I do love that connection with the audience. You hear immediately if something works or not, if a joke lands. And sometimes when that thing happens where you can just feel that the focus in the room is really there, you can just feel that like we're really creating this together. It's just, there's something magical about it. But I mean, it is hard, of course, to compete with the reach of TV and movies. What you do on stage, it lives there and then it's gone. But it is also kind of like a bit of the charm that it is here and now, and every performance is different.
Yeah, when I was this past in New York, my cousin and I, we have a tradition of going to see theater, and we saw a performance. Now with our smartphones, and I know going to concerts, everyone pulls out their phone, but one of the things I like about live theater is you don't pull out your phone to record this and share with whoever your friends are on social media. You just live there. Like, I like the way you do that.
Yeah, definitely. It's the audience get to be here and now just as much as the actors.
Yeah, there's a different energy, and I do love it as an audience member.
Yeah, and I do think the pandemic really reminded a lot of people of the power of live art. I mean, because the thing I do really like about even going to the movies as well, or going to the theater, or what it is that you can experience art with someone, even if you go there alone.
Well, to wind down, because you're 9 hours ahead, I just have a couple more questions if it's okay. But first of all, to ask, do you have any current or upcoming projects as far as your performance career?
One thing that is up and coming is I'm currently co-writing a play for now called Voice. Perhaps it's going to be called that as well when it premieres. I'm writing it together with actress and artist and writer Aurelia Day. Her idea, her vision, she's like the head writer, the initiator, and we're writing it together. And it's about basically the experience of being a Black woman in Sweden. It's about three friends. And it brings up, colorism and all of these things that these friends maybe haven't talked about before, because sometimes it's like, we're Black, we have to stick together. And then you have still differences within the group that maybe sometimes needs to be addressed. Yeah, we're writing that, and it's going to premiere at Angereds Teater in Göteborg in the fall of 2024, so next year.
Hopefully I'll be back there to see it.
Yay! Let's hope so.
Yeah, yeah. Well, for me, it just always reminds me that anything that we see art is coming from a personal place on some level, and just hearing you share this particular piece that's in process, yeah, just it reinforces that for me. And also, I feel like this is, especially at the end of our conversation, is a generic question, but when did you become aware? Because I don't usually ask this as much these days of, being lesbian.
I do think when I actually like fully realized it and came out to myself and my friends and so on was probably in my early 20s. I was maybe 21, 22, I think. And then I had probably known it subconsciously for a while, but kind of been like, nah, no, that can't be it. Especially also like growing up, I think subconsciously saw being queer as a white thing because there was like no representation back then. Of course, I knew you could be, but you can't be what you can't see.
The process of, because I've had people, straight people ask me, like, when did you accept it? And it's like, I think it's a lifelong process.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for me, it wasn't really that dramatic, I think, because I was also kind of, I guess, what you call a late bloomer. Like I didn't date before I came out. So for me, it was kind of just like I was uninterested in guys. And then I was like, oh, this is why, And I mean, I think it's also like there's a lot of other stuff probably that plays into why I didn't. I guess when I realized it, I kind of accepted it pretty quickly. I was like, okay, so this is the deal. I have another thing, like I have another box that I now check. I also thought it was kind of exciting in a way. And now I'm like, yes, I would not change who I am for the world. I'm so happy to be Black and queer. Like, come on, it's amazing. It's a struggle, of course, but it's great. We're awesome.
It's like metaphorically, I don't know if that's the right way to say, speaking, having an extra layer, color of the rainbow.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I'm really, really grateful for the community that we have. I think it's one of the reasons also that I'm now feeling the way I do, that I'm now like, yeah, it's amazing. We're amazing. It's also because I found a community of other Black queer people and other queer people of color as well. So I'm really grateful also for like the last few years, finding a community has become easier as well, with internet and social media and all of that. If I grew up today, maybe it wouldn't take me 22 years to realize.
I came out, I was a late bloomer too, but I still need to see it. I still need to hear it. I still need to feel the energy from other people that share their stories.
It's a lifelong process and it's ongoing living.
I always ask everyone at the end of this journey, this conversation, do you have any final thoughts or insights?
No, just thank you for the opportunity to talk about these things. I feel it's been a great conversation, and it's also great to kind of revisit these things. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, so thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you. Yeah, I mentioned before the recording I was nervous seeing you on social media, and then just really discovering through us connecting your work as a journalist, as a writer, and the country that I've been able to visit and make connections with and have friends. So to find out that there's, Black queer people in Sweden who are making it happen and living their best lives, it's just really great to be able to chat with you today.
No need to be nervous. This has been amazing.
Oh, good. Where can we engage with you online?
Best way is probably Instagram. You can find me at Palmira Koukkari Mbenga. That's, I think, where I'm most active. Please slide into my DMs. if you want to connect, that'd be amazing. And you can also find me on Facebook if anyone is still on there, Palmira Koukkari Mbenga.
Thank you for spending time with us. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, comment, and subscribe. Share with your friends too. You can also follow us on Instagram at Our Black Gay Diaspora and on Twitter at BLK Gay Diaspora. Until next time.